My name is Sam Tallman. I'm Director of Energy Services for Green Power Technologies, co-principal here at the Energy Forum, and a member of the board at Fundación Borincana, joined by my normal conversation partner, Tom King, who's founding director at Fundación Borincana and co-principal here at the Energy Forum. Tom, good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too, Sam. It's been hours since we spoke last.
I
So,
know. It's twice in a day. The programs that we have on Thursday nights coincide with our regular Puerto Rico Energy Forum internal check-ins, and so this is a two-a-day
yeah.
privilege that you and I get. We're also joined by Swaroop Parekh. We were going to have Dane Bonson, who is ill. And so he tagged in his partner at Boundary Stone Partner, Swaroop, who's been a longtime friend of the program and joined us last September for a presentation for the National Clean Energy Week event that we put on at Vivo Beach Club. And so this is our second event of the month, or second segment of the month, where we are talking about the most topical issues affecting energy in Puerto Rico. And one of the hottest topics, both on the island but also around the country, is what's happening in Washington. How do we navigate what's happening in Washington? And Boundary Stone really has their finger on the pulse there. So, Swaroop, welcome and good to have you with us. Thank you for being available.
Thank you, Sam. Very happy to be here. Very happy to see you and folks in Puerto Rico, particularly after the events of the last few weeks, and glad to see folks are doing well. Yeah, very happy to be here. Dane sends his apologies. He is actually in India at the moment, violently ill, as he texted me. So he asked me to step in. He's actually on a trip with the vice president right now, who's also in India, and he was doing some advance work for his trip. So he should be back soon, and we should be able to reschedule with him
Yeah.
and talk through a little more of what he does. Maybe I can just start with a quick overview of Boundary Stone and sort of what we do, and then jump into the rest of it. I know looks like it's Sonia and Javier at the moment, who I don't know, but I know everyone else on the call. So I'll keep it.
Yeah, so before you do that, Swaroop, and I definitely want to give you an opportunity. I think that's the best place to start. Just a
Sure.
quick housekeeping note for the folks that are going to be watching or listening to this after the fact, which is we have an in-person event planned for May 27th at Medtronic's facility in Juncos. We are going to be talking to the folks from Medtronic's infrastructure team as well as from 2G Energy that has been developing their cogeneration facility, understanding how Medtronic as an energy user approached having on-site energy. We're going to have an update from our microgrid development team to figure out how do we make microgrid more replicable, microgrid development, excuse me, more replicable in Puerto Rico, and what are the barriers that need to be overcome for that to happen. If you're a member and you're hearing my voice, you already have some information in some of the recent emails I've sent out about this event. You're able to join us in person May 27th in Juncos. Reach out, let us know, get a ticket, reserve your spot. Space is limited, and so we definitely want to see you there and participate in this. All of that's going to be followed by a networking happy hour. And so if you're just there for snacks and drinks, and you want to learn a little bit about microgrids, you're more than welcome. We'd love to have you. Next Tuesday, the last piece of housekeeping is next Tuesday we'll be speaking with Adalia Gonzalez, a lawyer at Ferioli, who has been working very closely on the IRP and also on a number of other projects being developed here in Puerto Rico. And so that conversation is scheduled for Tuesday at 11 a.m. and is open to the public. And so if you're not already signed up for the last Tuesday of the month conversations, do so. We'll make sure that the link is included in the email that we send out, but very much look forward to that conversation. It is timely and important as we understand the shifts away from some of the previous priorities in the IRP to what's coming down the pike. So I think that's the right segue into this. Tom, I see you're about to add
Yeah.
something.
I was just yeah I was actually just going to add one other thing, which is several people add AI readers to these member meetings, and we record these, so we dismiss them every time. And there were like 7 or 8 members getting lazy. Watch. But yeah, no offense, it's just policy. So try to make these. If not, we tend to have these recordings for members up and accessible on YouTube within a couple of days of having these. And then the general session, the same thing. The general session is open, and we put it up to the general public within a couple of days.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. So this is Puerto Rico Energy in 60 minutes, and the reason we created this segment is to cover really the last month of news, all collated in one place. And so we're going to get to the island-wide outage and get your take on that. I know that you're not based in Puerto Rico, and is not your sole area of focus, but you are an expert in energy and some of the other areas that you guys look at. So your perspective there is going to be valuable. Let's start with who is Boundary Stone? What do you guys focus on, and how does that relate to Puerto Rico?
Great. Yeah, thanks, Sam. So Boundary Stone Partners, we are a government affairs and government relations consulting firm based in Washington, D.C. We've been in existence for a little over 10 years with about 40 people. We also have a small office in the LA area. We are the only firm in DC, a government affairs firm, that is exclusively focused on the energy transition and everything related to energy and energy adjacent sectors as well. We do 3 things primarily. One is we provide we're a strategic advisory shop that provides really policy intelligence, political intelligence, and just other forms of strategic advice relating to policy related to energy. So our clients can be, small startups or single IPPs, all the way up through some of the largest publicly traded global corporations out there, that are focused on understanding DC and the policy and the environment around climate and the opportunities that come out of DC as things change so much. So really, I think that macro advisory strategy aspect is one part of our business. Second part is the actual lobbying. So we have folks here who will lobby on behalf of companies, lobby to Congress, lobby to administration all over the Hill, whatever it may be, to have their priorities heard and hopefully included in legislation. Ultimately, if that's the goal. But otherwise, to at least raise awareness and to bring up the things that affect them and the things that they would like to see changed. And then the third part of the business is our finance team, which is where I sit. And we are tasked with helping clients get through financing programs in the government. And I'm going to not say a lot because Bruce is on here, and so I don't want to say anything wrong or something he
You got to risk it. You got to risk it.
But I think he would agree with me, that these financing programs are tough to get through, and they require time, a lot of patience, a lot of knowledge. And you just have to put your best foot forward, and you have to really be prepared for the long haul to get through the diligence and the approval processes. And so, we try to help clients do just that. Our focus over the last 2 years really has been the Loan Programs Office at Department of Energy, just because that's where the most activity has been lately. But that if it shifts, we'll pivot elsewhere. But we also work with the Export-Import Bank, which has various financing programs. We work with the Development Finance Corporation, which finances projects overseas, and we work with the Department of Defense. Now it has a new office called the Office of Strategic Capital, which is a loan program that finances 31 different covered technology areas that touch the Department of Defense in one way or another. And one of those is renewable energy and renewable energy systems. So we have a number of clients involved with them and engage with them. Yeah, our team, we provide this expert advice on the funding, the policy, the lobbying, macro advisory, geopolitical advisory, wherever it is needed, and a voice in DC is needed related to the energy transition, we are there. Our firm was started by 2 former chiefs of staff of the Department of Energy during the Obama years, but we have a strong contingent we're a bipartisan firm, so we have a strong contingent of Republicans on our team as well, some of them who are very high up in Congress, including the energy person for the former Speaker of the House, and the current Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, and other folks that were very high political appointees during the Trump years at the Department of Energy. and the White House. So, we are pretty well connected. We like to keep our finger on the pulse of all the different programs that are going on throughout the government. We are really honored and really proud of the fact that we were able to support one of the first company in Tranche 1 in the PREPA Tranche 1 in Puerto Rico to get through a conditional commitment and approval and disbursement of funds through Bruce and team at LPO. And we're really proud of that fact. We are very committed to Puerto Rico. One of our founders has a strong connection here. Dane Bonson, who was supposed to speak today, has a very strong personal connection there. I too have a personal connection to Puerto Rico. I got married in Puerto Rico, and I've spent some time down there, and it's just a very important place to me. So it's been important for us. Maybe I'll take some of what Dane may have wanted to talk about today, relating to the policy side. We've spent a lot of time ever since the election trying to educate and make sure that the people who are coming into office and will be involved somehow with the administration keep Puerto Rico on their radar, right? It was not, you can't say it was a priority for Trump on his election, on his campaign. So I think,
Yeah.
really beating the drum and really being that persistent voice all over DC, making sure all stakeholders know about the issues that are going on, about what some of the solutions might be, about what the government is doing, what the government is not doing, and what we should be doing. We try to play a very pivotal role, I would say, in that conversation.
So, let me jump in here and maybe we start with that last comment and work our way backwards. When you guys are beating the drum around Puerto Rico, about Puerto Rico around DC, what's the response? What is sort of the, I mean, do people roll your eyes? Do people say, yes, that's our priority too? What's the, somewhere in the middle? What are you guys
It's
getting in response?
Yeah, it's really surprising. I think I would say the majority of the responses have been that they don't know what's going on. They don't understand that funding has been tied up. They don't realize that um, just the dire situation of the energy structure in Puerto Rico. They maybe they've heard of FOMB or PREPA, right? But they really don't know much of the story, and a lot of it is shaped by conjecture and other things they hear perhaps in the headlines. So I think it is really important to be educating folks, even some of the most senior staffers on the Hill that work for congressmen and women who are in districts that have a large Puerto Rican contingent don't even know some of the actual situation going on. So it's
Well,
been very surprising. The reactions have been very surprising. On the other hand, we also have Republican senators who presumably have no connection to Puerto Rico, but are very interested in it for a number of different reasons. So, it's a little bit all over the place, but I think the general feedback that I have received, that I have seen, is that the knowledge is not as where it needs to be, the
Yeah,
level.
and with Congressman Raul Grijalva's passing in March, of course, he was obviously a major advocate of Puerto Rican issues in D.C. and a congressman from Arizona, and so not that we always agree or disagree with him, but a voice definitely in favor of Puerto Rico issues, and somebody that's elevating some of these things in Washington. Let's jump into the LPO because in January of this year, there was a number of projects that had received either loan closing or major commitments. I think totaling over $1 billion, maybe $1.5 billion over the course of 3 or 4 different projects that included utility scale solar as well as large battery energy storage solution projects. What's the future of these? I mean, is the LPO going to honor those commitments? Is it basically saying, okay, we're the horse is out of the barn, but now the door is closed? What's the right way to think about the LPO's existing commitments and how do they think about future projects?
Sure. Yeah, happy to take that. And Bruce, if you'd like to take it, please, by all means. I would appreciate hearing from you, whatever you can say. But I'll give my opinion maybe to start with. I think this administration, they they're doing what every administration does in the first 100 days, which is reviewing every single dollar that goes out, right? They want to make sure it aligns with the administration's priorities. They want to make sure it's doing what they want to be seen and heard as doing. So I think that's what's going on right now. I think programs, as we said, started this conversation with, there is a lot in flux at the moment. This is unprecedented, the amount of people that are leaving the federal government at the moment. And there's just a lot of shakeup going on. Our feeling, our opinion at Boundary Stone is that ultimately the Loan Programs Office will be okay. We've heard that from a number of different places. It is a tool that the administration wants to use, but for projects that support their agenda and their energy dominance agenda. But I think just given the history of the governor meeting with the Secretary of Energy in Puerto Rico, again being something the Secretary of Energy has already spoken about so early, and I'm not going to say we take credit for that, but we certainly were involved in in trying to make sure that this was elevated to those levels. I think has helped to raise the priority. So we feel ultimately things should be okay at LPO, but it's really a moving target at the moment. Relative to other programs at the Department of Energy, I think LPO is in much better shape. You look at programs like the Office, OSED, the Office of Commercial Energy Deployment, where they take large, new, innovative technologies like direct air capture and hydrogen and other things like that. And the Biden administration, through the IIJA and IRA, had funded them with billions and billions of dollars. I think that programs like that are in real jeopardy, right? A lot of staff is left. They are leaving. They're essentially going to shut that office down. They may move some people over to smaller offices within DOE, but ultimately, realistically, it's shut down, right? So I think relative to that, the LPO is in better shape.
Yeah, the Office of Supply Chain Management, which is small but important, that's gone. And you would think that would be one that they would want to keep around, but yeah.
And then things, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask. So that's the LPO in terms of the Inflation Reduction Act, and I know that the Citizens for Responsible Energy Solutions, an organization on whose board Tom sits, they just worked with a variety of Republican senators to petition for the maintenance or the retention of many of the tax credits that are associated with the IRA. Is your sense that that is also safe, because a lot of that, particularly manufacturing or project development, might take place in red districts? Or is that a little bit more on the chopping block and less like the LPO?
Yeah, that's a great question, and my answer to that changes every day because things are moving around so much. I think initially the fear was that they would take, the administration and you folks would really use a butcher approach as opposed to a scalpel approach to the tax credits. I don't think that that's what's happening now. There's enough, as you suggested, Sam, entrenched
That's what
interests.
today, at least. Maybe we ask you tomorrow.
No, look, I mean, they don't want. While Trump wants a lot of fights on a lot of things, that this is not something that Congress wants to fight over. And the original fear, was that all of the tax credits would be gone as a pay for, right, to provide more not so beneficial tax credits or tax breaks extensions. So that basically stopped with the original letter from the congressman. So that was never going to make it all the way, as a thrown out. They say no, we're not trading the tax credits for tax cuts, tax cut extensions. So, but with the senators, you've effectively worked it out so that it couldn't be added back in a I can't remember the word, but basically the way that they're pushing the budgets through on
Reconciliation.
Reconciliation. Thanks, appreciate that. So now you've got 4 Republican senators who are effectively blocking in any crazy attempt to just throw out tax credits. So you'll have to look at that. And to be honest, tax credits is the headline issue, but there are other things in there that are generally supported, mostly around the Infrastructure Act and the IRA. So.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, I think so folks are prepared, the House will be putting through its budget which is really just its its ideal budget very soon in the coming days. And we know that certain of the programs that we care about are zeroed out in their budget, but that's almost a symbolic gesture more than anything else, because they know that that's not what the Senate markup will look like at all. But they're trying to make a statement about saying of what they support and what they don't support. It's not actual reality. There will be
Yep.
a ton of press about this, and there will be a lot of headlines talking about, oh my God, they want to, zero everything out. And I think that's intentional. So just
Well, and that has its own effect, right? And what we're seeing with regards to tariff conversation, if it's on, if it's off, the volatility has its own effect, right? And so when we're thinking about projects either being planned or teams being put together or capital stacks being gathered, the volatility means that I can't actually move forward on many of those projects without exactly knowing what's going to happen, even if I have relative confidence one way or another, right? And so I think that's part of it, and the other part of it is if the LPO is going to prioritize a variety, a certain type of project moving forward, then how you can stack some of these different benefits on the federal level becomes at best uncertain, right? And so. I think it sort of leads me to my next question, which is the projects that you're looking at in Puerto Rico and supporting on the island. How much is capital a barrier to them, or there's a variety of other challenges that they're facing? I mean, is capital the last hurdle, or is capital just one of many? And really, the projects that have been financed or have received LPO support in Tranche One, they're still not operating, and it's not because there's a lack of capital, or is it?
I mean, I think there's all of the above is really the answer. I mean, there are plenty of issues, right? Capital is certainly obviously the primary issue, but everything related to that. So as some of these projects that you mentioned have closed or have received funding already, we're looking forward to the construction really moving ahead and the other projects being built. But they all have issues related to Puerto Rico, right, generally. And so one is the perception issue of PREPA being a counterparty that's in bankruptcy, right? So how do you underwrite that? And that is a whole education, right? That's a whole story that has to be gone through to the lenders, including the U.S. government. As you know, the capital markets don't really support Puerto Rico, particularly on new greenfield development in energy. So it really is, the government is really the only one at the moment that's financing these projects there. And I think that's the role of government, to do these types of things that the private sector isn't ready or willing to do just yet, to pave the way for the private banking community, capital markets to come in and take over at some point, which is why the LPO was created. When I first started there in 2010, that was our intent, which is to work ourselves out of a job. So we financed the first few utility scale solar PV projects, the first utility scale wind farm, the first utility scale nuclear power plant in the US in a generation. And the idea being that we do a few of those. I think solar is the best story there. Now, it's completely homogenous to all banks, right? Regardless of where their energy policy is, they'll do solar deals, and tax equity bridge loans are just the name of the day right now with financing. So, I mean, I think that's sort of the idea. And in Puerto Rico, similarly, if we can, if the government could do these few projects, get things going, bring confidence to the capital markets that PREPA is a strong counterparty, Puerto Rico is a good place to invest. I think then I think things will improve, hopefully, in a way that's significant, right? I think we've
So,
seen a little bit of that, and obviously the bankruptcy and FOMB issues, notwithstanding. I think we'll see improvements once.
so that's the theory.
That's the theory. Okay.
And it's generally a good one. But knowing what about Puerto Rico, and Sam and I can rattle off a whole bunch of them. But in your opinion, why is this a good model? What good is coming out of this, and why is it a bad model in terms of probable new financing or moving to the more things to the private sector? Just one of each.
Yeah.
Just
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess you could theoretically, I'll start with the bad. It's that theoretically crowding out the private sector from doing these deals because the government's doing it, right? And so it's almost like, it's the additionality question that always comes up. Now you look at the facts of Puerto Rico, and that just doesn't apply in this situation.
Correct. There is
So,
nothing but additionality in
yeah,
Puerto
yeah,
Rico
yeah,
right now. Yeah.
exactly. I think the good is like it's a policy priority, and whichever administration comes in, uh, they should be able to, pursue their policy priorities. And Puerto Rico certainly was one for the prior administration. We're working hard to make sure it is for the current administration. And Puerto Rico is part of the United States. You're shocked when you really learn some of the details of what's going on, and so how many people are suffering, and it's just not a priority for Americans on the mainland generally, as you all know far better than I do. But I think it's part of the U.S. and if we're going to make America great again, we have to include Puerto Rico in that conversation. And it really is such a strategic asset for the U.S. I mean, you would think that there would be a lot more attention given to it, given its location, given its English speaking population, given its proximity, everything that comes with it, and the manufacturing that was thriving there at some point, and bringing that back, hopefully, all these things that could really make it flourish again. I think just need to be further expounded and really just educated. Education, I think, is the main thing right now with this administration. So, roundabout way of answering your question. I mean, I think there's good and bad with all of it with government financing, and we can debate that till the cows come home. But I think in situations such as Puerto Rico today, I think it's necessary.
Well, and I think that last word there is really part of the challenge, right? And this is no fault of the LPO or government financing. It's that it's the only option. And the LPO was never intended to be the only option. It was supposed to be the best first option or the lender of last resort. And in Puerto Rico, because of a bankrupt off-taker and a variety of other challenges, it is the it's the lender of only resort in many cases.
Yeah.
And that's again no fault of the LPO. It ends up speaking to some of the structural issues on the ground, and I think that's sort of where I wanted to go with the conversation, which is the prior administration was very much focused on understanding how to do not just providing some of the capital necessary to do the projects, particularly at a utility scale, but they were studying very closely um, the grid modernization effort, right? They did a PR 100 study, a 2-year effort to provide a conclusion that I think many of us could have spent no dollars on, and basically said that, yeah, it's going to be incredibly expensive to get to 100% renewable. It's going to be incredibly challenging, and there's going to be a whole bunch of fights about whether or not is it all rooftop, is it all everything that basically came to the conclusion is yes, it's possible. Do you want to do it still? And the new administration, both in Washington and here in Puerto Rico, have basically said maybe not. The long-term horizon does not attend to the challenges we're facing today, yesterday, and tomorrow. And so, in the spirit of Puerto Rico Energy in 60 Minutes, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about an island-wide blackout that occurred last week, a week from yesterday, where a tree fell on a transmission line, and the fail-safe to protect the island failed, and the entire island suffered a more than a day of total outages. The federal government has a different approach towards grid modernization. And I think that, well, let me pose this as a question. How is it diverting resources away from supporting projects that may not be part of its agenda and towards understanding how do we just fix the structural reality so that not only projects that are financed by any means can actually get online, but we can also open the door to a competitive financing market where the LPO goes back to its original role of being the lender for risky projects, but not the only project finance support.
Yeah, great questions. Just thinking about where to start. I think one is that the fact that funds exist The FEMA funds exist. I think it's $17 billion or so to fix the grid in Puerto Rico since the 2017 timeframe, and those have not been spent yet, right? That when people on the Hill hear that, their jaws drop. They don't know that. People don't understand that. It's not evident to them that that's what's happening. That the issue is that those funds are not able to be released for whatever the conditions are, right? So that's number one. Our
Yeah, they're
understanding is
they're
that.
reimbursable. Let's talk about that. I want to put
Sure.
a pin in something and talk about education in Washington later, and Puerto Rico, which is what kind of we're all about. But we're so please finish answering it. I just want to put a pin in that.
Sure. Yeah, and I know there's differing viewpoints, and everybody has their own say in this, and it is it is a complex issue for sure. But I think it's a fact, right? That there are funds available and they have not been used. And when you look at what just happened a week ago, and you think about the fact that these funds are sitting there and still not been used, you it's really surprising. It's really shocking, right? To think that this isn't fixed yet. So I think there's there's good and the bad with all government financing. I think going back to I think your question, Sam, your initial question at least, just is there sort of a moral hazard, right? Is there this idea that you're throwing good money after bad? All of that sort of needs to be kind of corrected, and so that's really where we've been focused and what Dana and I have been focused on doing the last few months.
So I know that, Tom, let me follow up on that before we get to your
Yeah,
question about
please.
education,
Yeah.
because I think that's a really important area we want to touch on. But if, and this is a conversation I've had with Dane a number of times, but, in thinking about the transactional nature of the Trump administration and interest in um, quick wins, right? Um, what wand can be waved for what outcome, right? On one hand, it is PREPA's in bankruptcy, and there's a set of issues that's a legal matter, right? And nobody can properly intervene in the appellate court and get PREPA out of bankruptcy tomorrow. There's some movement on that, and we can talk a little bit about that as well. But that seems to be a core structural issue that without which you're not going to really attract additional capital. On the other hand, as you mentioned, there's federal funds that are there. What can be done tomorrow to improve the federal government's role in energy reliability? Forget about cost, forget about sourcing, forget about a variety of other things, but just like making sure the power stays on tomorrow for 3.5 million U.S. citizens. And I know that people like Mike Lee and others just I know I hesitate to ramble here, but like I know that this is on people's desks, but like what can actually be done?
Yeah, I mean, like it's a great question. I think there's you think emergency measures, right? But emergency measures have already been issued, right? So you're wondering what is next. I mean, obviously, I think the president with a stroke of a pen can do certain things in emergency situations. Um, I think this has been a longer standing, the issues of the Puerto Rico energy structure have been long standing, and I don't think there's a quick easy fix to any of this, right? It will take a lot of work. I think our thesis is that the fastest way to rebuild, and the cheapest way to do it is initially at least through solar, because you can get solar projects up and running in probably the shortest amount of time relative to an LNG plant or something else. So it could still provide, I think utility scale solar is certainly the right option. I think there's the grid. Obviously, you can build all the generation you want. If the grid isn't properly rebuilt, it doesn't really mean anything. So I think getting emergency funding to the grid is, my opinion, the most important first step. Having those funds that already exist and being unlocked, I think would be the next best step. I'm not too familiar with the details of exactly how those contracts are laid out. I know it's on a reimbursement basis. I think that's
Yeah.
the problem immediately. So if there's a way to perhaps, change that.
So we've come right back to where I wanted to get back in, and somehow it always comes back in involving the bankruptcy. But um, no, you're right. There are a lot of things. So first of all, yeah, I mean, it's easy to go $17 billion. Why haven't you spent this? Well, $17 billion was assigned to a state and companies in bankruptcy. When you're in bankruptcy, you have no working capital. Without working capital, you can't build things and get reimbursement. And so, there are actually potentially some fairly simple proposals that could be addressed. I mean, they probably need to go through several groups. Bruce Westerman, right, is the most important person in Congress, perhaps in D.C. when it comes to Puerto Rico, because he's the chair of the Natural Resources Committee in Congress. Natural Resources Committee oversees the Interior Department. The Interior Department oversees territories, Commonwealth. So everything, and Indian Affairs. So it's a strange situation, but it actually, within respect to Puerto Rico, makes him quite powerful, and his committee and his group and team have to pretty much sign off on any major things that you do. So when FEMA is doing stuff, they got to check with the natural resources because it's a territory. So perhaps starting with educating there. But the point is, people just don't understand, right? We gave you all this money. Why haven't you spent it? Say, well, we have to have money in order to spend money. And while it was probably unthinkable in a Biden administration, like the attitude of, how do we cut through this shit, right, is much more prominent in a transactional environment and in the environment that we are here. I've said this before, but in relation to kind of the big thing, if you've got $2.5 to $3 billion of working capital, which is really what you need in order to spend this. This is not really my numbers. These are numbers that the creditors came up with in their deal, and relate back to earlier things. But that sort of turnover allows you to get kind of 10 to $12 billion out the door, and rebuilt in about 6 years, right? Which still seems like a long time, but a lot of things could happen. With 17 billion set aside, you could in effect cut through that and say, hey, you know what, we're taking $2.5 billion of this away, potentially, but we're going to advance it to a group, whoever it is, etc., obviously with some discipline, to be that working capital, right? So we're gonna put this money out based on all of the approved streamlined projects. We're gonna make sure that group oversees the various departments that have to sign off on something for money to be spent and these things delayed. And we're going to work that way for the next 6 years. And if you misspend it, or if you do something, it's like you're gonna your working capital is going to drop and you're not going to get it back effectively. So it's an unusual step, because when FEMA provides these money to states, the states have money. They can raise money, they can tax, they can do whatever, they can take things out of their general fund in order to fund these things, and then work to claim the money back from the government. That is not available to Puerto Rico in any way, shape, or form right now. So that'd be one thing. But coming back to the general education, this and that sort of thing, I mean, the hearings have all been about it's your fault, it's your fault, it's your fault, etc. We need
Well,
to be able to come and talk to people in DC. So maybe that's something we can work on.
yeah, I mean, I'll just add, in this week's news on the 22nd, bondholders filed an unredacted declaration after basically um, what is it called when a strip search of PREPA's uh, a probe of their financial reports from 2018 to 2023, and it basically showed that they generated more revenues than the Fiscal Oversight Board indicated they generated, and it just goes back to the same starting point of the circle, which is, can you pay us or not? You're saying you can't. We're saying you have more than you think. There's a third, fourth, fifth entity that's disputing how much revenue there actually is there. and Tom, to your point,
Yeah.
bankruptcy proceedings in other jurisdictions haven't lasted this long, and don't hold hostage the folks that depend on those entities being. I don't even need them to be well-oiled machines. I need them to be solvent minimally, right?
Yep.
And that's a different can of worms. We're not seemingly getting closer to.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, effectively, PG&E has been bankrupt twice. And but the infrastructure of the state isn't bankrupt. The monies that are there, and their creditors and their equity took the hit, right? And you convert it to stuff, but again, you have a public entity here. So you don't have a private entity. So
Yeah,
you're
when
dealing
you
with
have a rate
things.
base, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have a rate making authority, right? Which changes everything in these conversations.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think I like, I mean, Tom, I like your idea. I've heard variations of that before. You just cut out
Yeah.
some of the initial amount and make that the revolving sort of working capital that is needed to get things moving. Makes a lot of sense. I think, this is just my idea. I think there's massive potential for just a private public-private partnership, which is the P3 model, to come in at that point once things start moving a little bit and there's confidence. I think there are investors in Puerto Rico, for example, in the highway deals. I've worked on some of those in my banking days, and there's certainly interest. So I think there's certainly knowledgeable parties that would be very focused on investing there if there was some confidence in that things were going to get done, right, and not just get stuck. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of different things we could do once things start moving, and I think that's the issue from my perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
That's a different problem, but
yeah,
not unrelated because it's all Puerto Rico.
it's all
Yeah.
Puerto Rico. Yeah,
Yeah.
let me zoom out and think more broadly about the federal government administration's energy priorities. There's a bit of a mouthful, but how they think about unleashing energy dominance, right? Is the language they've used. Um, are you guys seeing a greater focus on nuclear, for instance? And I know that that's pun intended radioactive for Puerto Rico, but something the LPO may have more experience with and having more directive from their bosses to say, let's start doing more of those types of projects, catch up with other jurisdictions around the world that are looking at it.
Yeah, I mean, I think going back to my initial comment, it's still early, right? It's only been just about 100 days at this point. It feels like many years, perhaps, to some of us, but it's still very early in the administration. So yeah, I mean, our conversations have been really, and our pivot, frankly, for our business has been to support those technologies and projects that the administration has said from in the energy dominance order and with the new council that's set up with Bergman as the head. There's a strong sort of, I don't want to even say suggestion. I don't know what the word is. It's pretty clear that they're going to focus on these areas, right? So yes, nuclear, hydro, critical minerals. Well, I'm missing a few others, but obviously anything
Well,
oil and gas.
there's one that friends of mine are trying to get into there, which is HVDC regional grid.
Transmission. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think so. The focus certainly is going to be there, but I don't think that means that everything else stops, right? There's the other work will continue. It's just that there's more of an initial certainly focus on that, and perhaps there's a lot of conversations going on in DC about how they're going to do that. For example, they had a huge discussion on and a big press release on data centers and AI, right? And that SoftBank was going to invest $500 billion, and there's going to be I mean, it's been crickets since that announcement,
Of
right?
course.
Very little. So things are going to come in the headlines. Things are going to come up because it's politics, and that's the way it is. And some things will get done, some things won't. I think where we feel things are necessary, such as in Puerto Rico, I think we need to just keep pushing. And I think ultimately I'm hopeful that things will move in the right direction. It's a matter of making sure the right people are hearing the message and understanding that they need to do something about this. So I think also like there's just too much to explain to somebody in a few minutes, right? You have a few minutes with a Hill staff, or some of them are these young 20-year-olds, first job out of college, and they don't understand any of this. They don't understand what a restructuring of a municipality is. They don't understand what basic concepts are that we're talking about. So it's really getting to the right people and making sure that there's a unified message, and that we're pounding the drum in the echo chamber so that it's heard over and over again.
So I want to feed off of that optimism and ask you to speculate, like we talked about at the beginning of the conversation before we hit record. But as you said, we are still trying to wade through a lot of information, try to figure out what's happened over the last 100 years, 100 days, and what's going to happen next. As you look
Feels like
between
100
now
years.
and yeah, I mean, it's felt like 100 years. Between now and the end of the year, what do you envision? And remember, if you're wrong, it was only speculative, and if you're right,
Yeah.
you get all the credit for having predicted the future.
Okay. Yeah, I think I heard there's another infrastructure week coming up in May. So, we'll see what is discussed there. I think, again, things are being broken down right now. They're going to have to be rebuilt. I think the priorities have been laid out at a high level. So I think we'll see more action in those areas for sure. I am really not only happy, but I'm shocked that Puerto Rico got the attention it did early on, right? That the governor met with the secretary, the GDO, the Development Office from DOE was down in Puerto Rico a few weeks ago, talking things through. I think there was the secretary's comments, whether you agree with him or not in terms of what the generation resource mix should be, the fact that he's focused and talking about Puerto Rico. There is someone in his office who is, getting up to speed very quickly on it. So, I mean, I think there is optimism. There's reason for optimism that things for Puerto Rico will be a priority. It's just impossible to say at the moment. It's exactly how that will look. I think the LPO program that Bruce and team has developed, I think, is certainly going to be one of the most important instruments that they have that they can use. Partly because it's been successful already, and so they can, in the next 2 years before the next political cycle and election, there can be a lot of ribbon cuttings based on the work that LPO has done already, right? So, and obviously what everybody in Puerto Rico is doing. I think there are other offices for infrastructure. Let's say at the Department of Transportation, I know that's doing quite a bit. Maritime infrastructure is a big one, big priority. There's another executive order issued on, make shipbuilding great again. And so we have some developers in Puerto Rico who are talking to us about infrastructure and using some of the great sort of waterside land availability there to perhaps develop further there. And on that would be, you can't talk about any of that in Puerto Rico without how you're going to get energy to those developments. So microgrids are a big conversation. So I think there's a lot to go, and I am hopeful, as I said, that this is a transactional administration, and I think they will want to see quick wins, and I think there are some that are definitely possible. And if there is any administration, this one is the most, I think somebody said on the call earlier, willing to sort of, take the hatchet to things and just go and break things down and get things done. I think this is probably the one. So I am hopeful. It's hard to say exactly what it's going to look like at the moment, though.
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
also an administration that's basically has expressed in a number of different ways, whether again agree or disagree, that stop bringing me only bad options
Right.
when it comes to a variety of challenges that are long term, right? And so we definitely know that in Puerto Rico, doing the same thing for the last 8 years when it comes to PREPA's bankruptcy has not worked. And so if we can breathe some creativity into the problem, who knows what will come out the other side. Um, and they're definitely not afraid to move fast and break things. So
Yeah.
hopefully we see those good moments you referenced and can continue to follow their progress. I know that we're coming up to the end of our hour here. If anybody on the line would like to ask Swaroop a question, feel free to either put it in chat or unmute yourself. Bruce, I know if you're on the line, if you heard something just egregiously wrong that Swaroop mentioned, now would be the best opportunity to call him out on it or augment what he said. I- most of it, I think, was spot on.
No, Swaroop did a great job. But I'm here as a private citizen, so I'm not really authorized to speak for the DOE. So I'm here really just to be a listener tonight. So, but thank you.
Well, great. We're glad to have you with us, and um, you know, I believe in competition, so I'd love to see the LPO have some competition here in Puerto Rico, and I believe that that makes everybody's rates and business styles more competitive, right? So, um, Swaroop, that's all the official questions I have. Where did you get married in Puerto Rico?
In Fajardo.
In Fajardo, nice. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So it was, uh, so we're of Indian descent, and my wife is also of Indian descent. And I don't know if you're familiar with Indian weddings, but basically you have to invite the whole village, which for us on the East Coast would have been, 600 people, and we absolutely did not want to do that since we were paying for it ourselves. So we decided to do a destination which eliminated, 90% of the riffraff. And we actually had the people who actually cared about us the most and the people we wanted there were there, which was wonderful. And everybody had a great time. It was a great weekend, and we still talk about that, even though it was 12 years ago now. So
I went to the wedding of Dheeraj and Duja
oh
because
yeah,
this is 20 years more in the rearview mirror because I was doing consulting work and other things with the Hindujas and others. And there were like 120,000 people
right.
at
That's
the
right.
wedding, and it was held at the race course outside of Mumbai,
Wow.
which the Hindujas owned. And the other tradition is the groom rides in on something, right? And the wealthier you are, so of course the groom rode in on an elephant that was all decked out in gold and everything. And not to leave it there, basically the entire entourage came on elephants behind him. So
Wow. That's
it's
right.
like
I rode in
a
on a
whole
golf
other
cart,
level.
just so you know. That was an electric golf cart, is what I rode in on. Just so you know.
Well, Swaroop, I
Thank
will
you.
be, you and I will have something in common. I'm getting married in next weekend, and I
Oh,
will be
congratulations.
walking in. So,
In
we'll
Puerto Rico or
in Puerto Rico, yeah.
oh,
And then we'll
congratulations
probably
then.
have to carry you out, but
Yeah, well, yeah, maybe I'll go out on an elephant. Um,
Maybe you'll think you did. So that would
yeah, at least you can tell me the next day. Um, Well, Swaroop, really appreciate again you pinch hitting for Dane, and we definitely want to have Boundary Stone join us again in September. Tom and I have already, and Javier and the rest of our team at the Energy Forum have um, started planning with an appropriate timeline this year for our event in September, and we've got a 2 day event planned with a bunch of panels. Finance is basically going to take up a full day or 3/4 of
half
a
day.
day.
Yeah.
Yeah, trying to really understand how do federal funds, private capital, some creative vehicles can come into play here. The green bank on the island, the local incentives, et cetera, because it's not just there's not just a single bullet in that gun, right? And trying to make sure that we can put them into play in conjunction. Yeah, Javier just put it in the chat, but it's September 15th to the 16th. So I know that that is conveniently when a bunch of other climate weeks take place around the country. But Swaroop, if you're available, put it on your calendar. We'd love to have you back down on the island. Your great presentation last year, and obviously we'll quiz you on what you got wrong and what you got right. We're about 100 days since Trump took office for administration 2.0. Then we'll be about 250 days. So we'll have a lot more learning under our belt, and would love to hear your insight on it.
I think that's absolutely right. Yeah, it was a great event last year. Thank you for inviting me. And yeah, definitely it's on my calendar and I will do whatever I can to be there.
Yeah. I think we're probably going to be back at the Vivo Beach Club
Yeah, that
again.
place was great. Yeah, it was
And
great.
we're probably going to look to double our numbers, but that means we need two beer drinking, tasting, and other receptions. That's why we had to go to 2 days. So
All
Yeah.
right, good.
All right. Well,
All right, thank
thank
you.
you for being a part of the Energy Forum and for joining us today for Puerto Rico Energy in 60 Minutes.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.